So we have a coming together, listening, hearing, learning from one another, because we are the power and the strength of transformative action.
Or we're looking for the courage to forgive. So we're going to take that step and we're going to forgive. Other of us who are a little bit more ready and we have a two-party deal, we're going to move from that place of courage and we're going to gain that heart of reconciliation like the 10 man did. And we're going to learn how to reconcile. For the last group, what we're going to do is come to an understanding of the true process of reconciliation. Because there's a lot of people who say, oh, I reconcile with this person. But really what you did is you left the elephant in the room and you swept it under the bridge. So you tend to see the issues, the recurring cycles of anger. One minute you get along, the next minute you don't. When you see them, one minute you want to smile, but the next minute you're like, I really don't like this people. They didn't tell anybody what really happened. Oh, she didn't tell her how she lied on me and this, that, and that. But it's because all we did was sweep it under the rug. So we have to get to that understanding. Without that two-person reconciliation, it's not going to happen because one person's going to be willing to admit while the other person isn't. And there's no moving forward. Um, so, um, our steps to forgiveness, and this probably is going to take a little bit sooner than I expected. I want to take a minute and actually get an idea of what our thought process is when it comes to forgiveness. We have a whiteboard over here, so I just gather a few minutes. Think about when you hear the word forgiveness, what's your first thought, whether it's a word or a saying? What are some things? Can someone put that whiteboard for me? Thank you, thank you. Okay, so what are some things when you hear about forgiveness? Raise your hand, shout it out. What are some things? Hold on.
Means peace.
Peace. Okay, so we have peace up here. What are some other things we think about when we hear forgiveness? Humility. Agreed. What are some other things we hear?
Let it go.
Ooh, let it go. Let's go to the other side of the spectrum. What are some things we struggle with when it comes to forgiveness? Yes, we do. I'm gonna agree with you for the sure on that one. What else? Okay, we're gonna put resentment, but we're gonna put two because that was the double whammy. What are some other things? Ego. What else? And say that again. I'm not gonna spell that right at all. Oh, I love that one. Accountability. Hurt, shame. And I'm gonna get one more. Doubt. That one was great, actually. So look at these things. On the good spectrum, we have peace, humility, healing, let it go. But that's after everything you've dealt with on this side, after you've dealt with the resentment, the anger, the ego, having accountability, because we all seem to lack accountability when it's against us, hurt, shame, and doubt. So when we look at the steps of forgiveness, we're going to make sure that at some point we talk about this side so that we can eventually work our way to this side, right? So our first step of forgiveness is forgive yourself. You remember I told you earlier, one of the things I really struggle with is that I picked up his burden because he hurt me and he didn't get indicted. I decided it was my fault. And I decided to walk through that. But we have to learn how to forgive ourselves because if we can't forgive ourselves, guess what? I can't forgive you, right? The Bible says, love thyself, love thy neighbor as you love yourself. I can't love you if I don't love me. And in order for me to truly love me, I have to be willing to take that first step of forgiveness, right? The next thing, and do y'all have y'all's pens and papers? Because this is where we're going to get a little tough. The next thing we want to do is we want to admit to our pain. We have to acknowledge our pain. We walk around as if nothing is wrong with us. Every day we're bitter. We're at work being mean to our coworkers. We're being mean to our children. We don't smile. We're honking. And, that's all a part of that bitterness, that resentment. We're not in healthy relationships because I don't even trust the man. No man is good for me. No woman is good for me, right? And so we have to learn to acknowledge the pain that has hurt us. So in your paper, I want you to write, I acknowledge my pain, and write what your pain is. For me, mine is sexual abuse. I have to acknowledge that I was sexually assaulted by my father. And let me know when y'all are done, because then we're going to go to that next step. And if you have any questions, you know what, Carolyn? I'm not even going to worry about it. I think I remember everything. That works too. That works too. Zoom also, and I did not get to Zoom to ask them the questions. Please write down what it is. I acknowledge my pain. Have we all acknowledged what our pain is? Does anyone want to share? Any brave souls? No, that's okay. You want to share yours? Okay. So your pain of censorship?
Yeah, I can't deal with censorship.
I love that. Anybody else want to share? No? Okay. So now that we've acknowledged our pain, it's time for us to acknowledge the emotion tied to the pain. Every day we're walking around, we want to cry, we want to scream, we want to stop, but society says we're too emotional, we're unstable, we're mentally ill. Well, in order for us to overcome all of the emotional issues, the mentally ill issues, we have to begin to acknowledge the emotion tied to the pain. So I want you to acknowledge the emotion tied to the pain, and we're going to act it out as long as it does not hurt anyone else or any items. So if you feel like screaming, we're going to take a minute to scream. If you want to cry, we're going to take a minute to cry. If you want to stop, we're going to take a minute to stop. But I need everyone in here to acknowledge what that emotion is, what it's tied to, and release it. Okay? So at the count of 3, Zoom, are y'all with me? I hope so. Is everybody with? Y'all ready? Okay. 1, 2, 3. That works. Y'all didn't let it out fully, but we'll work with it. We'll work with it, and we'll let y'all. She's looking like I'm a little uncomfortable, not sure. But you know what? Thank you for being committed. Thank you guys for being committed. But that pain, and some people may not be comfortable, and that's okay, because this is something you can go home and do. That pain, when you feel it, it's important to acknowledge it. There are times when we wake up, especially me, I'll be the first one to say it. When I wake up in the morning and I don't know what's wrong with me, but what I know is I feel a burden. What I know is I want to cry. And so I take that time and I cry. And I don't let it be cute. Oh, no, I boo-hoo. I have screamed. And I have to be honest, because that's the only way. I have boo-hooed. I have neighbors back home in Texas that are probably like, something's wrong with this woman. But what it allowed me to do is to acknowledge that at this moment I'm in pain because I'm feeling this and I'm thinking about this. Maybe I had a triggering dream that made me think of my sexual assault. Or maybe the fact that somebody said something mean to me about this triggered some of the words that were said to me previously, and now I need to acknowledge it. So always be willing to acknowledge your pain and release it. The next one is whew, uh, once we cross over our emotional part where we've acknowledged our pain, where we're knowing how to deal with it, we have to start getting logical with things. So, and this picture was really pretty. There was a picture with the past erased. Acknowledge that the past cannot be changed. We can circle back to the past and we can always say, I could have changed it had I done this. I could have changed it had I done that. However, we can't change anything because it's already happened, and that's part of our process in moving forward. So we have to be willing to acknowledge that we can never revert and go backwards, but we can always use the lessons learned to move forward, right? Our next one, yeah, I'm missing. I feel like I'm missing a lot, but it's okay. Our next one. Hold on. We're gonna acknowledge our pain. I do need my PowerPoint. Hold on 1 second. Let me see. Oh, yeah. Let me just see a little view. Get the graphic. I just want to make sure I cover everything. Oh, right. I'm back. So there is one thing I didn't go over. The actual definition of forgiveness, which is the action or process of forgiving or being forgiven. So, and it was important for me to show you guys at the end so you understand there's a process that actually is required. It's said by definition. You have to go through the process. So we went over forgiving yourself, admitting your pain, acknowledging the emotion tied to it and releasing it. And then we want to seek to understand. That's another one. Once we get to a logical stage, it's no more based off emotion. I can be angry all I want to, but I have to understand that everybody in here is going through their own journey. This young man here said he has sensory issues. There's victims of sexual assault. There's victims who have had family members killed. There's different types of victims in here. And we all have to understand that each person handles their journey different. So where I may be in a place of healing and where may be able to move forward, that doesn't mean you are. And because you may not be there, I need to be able to understand that your reason for what you did does not cancel out what happened or the hurt that it caused. But I should be able to understand that, hey, this is where they were. They've had their own trauma. They haven't gotten to that point to really deal with it. So we seek to understand so that we understand that everybody has their own journey, but that does not negate what happened to me. However, it allows me to heal myself and move forward. Okay? Determine what forgiveness looks like to you. So when I asked you guys, what is forgiveness? People said healing. People said let it go. If healing is what forgiveness looks like to you, what does healing look like? Does that mean we're just going to say something happened to us and we move forward? Or do we begin to seek help? Do we seek therapy? Because therapy is going to get us to our ultimate healing. Oh, it's not public. We'll get to that. Is it ready? Listen, as long as technology is involved, there'll always be issues. You just prepare for it and work through it, right? And I want to make sure we'll keep going though. That's okay. But determine what forgiveness looks like to you. What does it mean to have humility? What does it mean to let it go? It sounds good when Elsa says it, but can we really let it go? Do you let it go if you see that person out walking the street and they're living a happy and they're living a happy life while you're struggling? Do you still forgive them at that time? Do you set boundaries or do you just decide that, hey, they have an understanding of what's not going to happen again? We're just going to move forward. We live in an era where we're quick to let people go, but we're not quick enough to tell them what's going on and why we're walking away. And that to me should always be a part of forgiveness because you need to understand why I'm leaving you. You need to understand how you've affected me and how I'm going to now let you go because of that. And I hate to say it, sometimes we have to understand that that's just not for friends. That's for family also. Okay? So now what if we're the offender? We're speaking from a point of victims, but what if we're actually the person who has offended someone else? Are we able to have that accountability to acknowledge our fault in the situation? Yes? No? Is it a little hard because at that time it feels like you did this, you did that, and you did this? That may come from a place of anger, but that's just trying to show you how they're hurting. So we have to be willing to forgive ourselves and acknowledge how we've hurt the other person.
Yeah, but some of us do that too much.
Is it ever a time of too much? Because when does forgiveness become too much when it's for you?
You get to be hating yourself.
Understandable. So that's a good thing. At what point do we decide that forgiveness is not enough? Or is there ever a point with it? Does anyone have anything to say back to that? I'm going to tell you my perspective. I feel like it's never a chance. I was raised in a church and we were taught that Jesus said, turn the other cheek. When I think of forgiveness, that's what I refer back to. It's not that I'm letting it go, but I have to continue to forgive, because if I don't forgive, then every time I'm not forgiving, I'm just taking the weight of somebody else with me. So now I'm angry with you, and I don't like people who have censor issues because you made me mad. Well, I don't like you because you were in burgundy, and then I don't like you because you got a hat on. So we're just steady taking people, we're taking issues that we haven't let go because I already forgave, and I forgave too much. There's never a amount of time that you've forgiven too much. You may not be able to reconcile, but you should always be able to forgive, because forgiveness is for you and not them. And that helps release the bitterness. Never take the blame. That's why I said forgive yourself. We forgive ourselves. Why? Because we've taken the blame of someone else when it wasn't our fault. And as victims, we always do that because we live in a world where victimization is easier than to actually blame the offender. That's why you hear so many people say, well, what does she have on when we're dealing with rape victims? What does she have on? What's she drinking? Well, what does that matter? Because even if she was fully dressed and had water, he's still an offender. Had it not been her, it was going to be somebody else, right? Apologize. If you're the offender, I hate to say it this way, put your big girl panties on and be willing to apologize. Something as simple as apology can go a long way. That was one of the biggest struggles I had, is I never got the apology. I really don't care at this point that you didn't tell anyone else, but it's the fact that you didn't have the decency to apologize to me. You put my feelings to the side and made me feel as I deserved it, or I should just take it and keep going forward. So always be willing to apologize.
But there's something like this is with children, like a parent says, apologize, say you're sorry, and they say, I'm sorry. You know what I mean? Like an authentic.
Yes, and I like that you pointed that out. Yeah. Don't apologize until you're ready. I really like that you said that. One thing she pointed out is, and that is real, apologize when you're ready. But she said that as children, we tell our children, say you're sorry. And they always give us that, I'm sorry, or I'm sorry. They don't mean it. We made them say it. They said it. That's going to get them off punishment. But as an adult, we need to be our adult logical selves and be able to get an understanding as to why we're apologizing. Don't just, hey, I apologize. I apologize because this is the offense I committed to you and you didn't deserve it. And let me be the first to say, saying, I'm sorry if I did this to you is not an apology. That is not an apology, and it's really just a backwards way of saying, I'm going to say what I need to say to shut you up, but I don't have any sincerity behind it. And I know we've all experienced that. Be willing to help understand and be open and honest about the circumstances. You remember earlier I said seek to understand from the perspective of the victim. Be open with your communication as the offender. If you were dealing with some things, then help that person understand, because even though why is never enough, it still sometimes helps. It helps me to know that you are under the influence and you cannot control yourself. It helps me to understand that you're a victim of sexual assault, and because you never got help, you don't realize it's wrong. Therefore, we have to get you educated to teach you properly. So be willing to be open if you're going to sincerely apologize. Now, here's my favorite. I'm just not interested in forgiving. What struggles do we have in forgiveness? We feel powerless to the offender. So before I got here today, I actually went through some of this with my client, but we went more in depth. And I asked the question, I was like, why do you not want to forgive? What is hurting you? And she was like, I'm not giving them my power. What? Why should they have power over me? And I was like, you do realize you're taking back that power. They don't even know you forgave them. They have no idea. You haven't had a conversation with them. You've just in your mind decided, I'm going to forgive you and I'm going to allow myself to move forward because my journey says that there's healing on the other side and I can't get there if I'm stuck here. Right? So the power, you're powerful when you forgive. You're powerless when you're carrying around that burden. You have no interest in rebuilding a relationship. Forgiveness does not equal automatic reconciliation. So if you don't, that's fine. Still forgive. Go ahead. Oh, hold on, wait. Don't go ahead, Jay. Yep, nope, not yet. Say your name for us.
I'm Elizabeth Lott. I'm the pastor here at this physical church. So I'm going to jump in with a pastor word for just a second about taking that power back. That the image you referenced with turning the other cheek is actually an instruction of nonviolent resistance to Jesus' disciples. Because the Roman Empire, the soldiers, the military, had the authority to take their hand like this and hit you with the back of their hand. And it meant you are less than I am. It's them saying, this is my power. So you turn your cheek. You're now asking them to take their hand and hit you like an equal. And so by turning that other cheek, you have put them on the same level with you. You've put yourself on the same level. So it's really nonviolent resistance, these instructions that Jesus is giving people to say, you might be the Roman Empire, but that doesn't mean anything about my identity. We're on the same level. So I think it's important to reframe that one, because we sometimes teach it in the churches, turn the other cheek and I'm just going to let people mistreat me. When really that action is saying, I'm taking my power back and I'm calling you out on what you're doing that's wrong.
Thank you, Pastor. And yes, no, we're not here to, one second. We're definitely not here to give anyone the equal ground. This is just our way in saying we're taking our power back by not acknowledging or retaliating against you, because you don't have that control over me. I'm in your way, and I'm so sorry. You got green on. You cute though.
Hi, my name is Kristen. I'm a senior at Rooted School, and someone had mentioned something before about like not being able to forgive, and I feel like something I've learned was that the reason why I didn't want to forgive was because I didn't necessarily know like forgiveness and boundaries. So just because I forgive you doesn't mean you have to have that same place back in my life. And I feel like that's where a lot of people get it confused, because you think if you forgive them, well, y'all have to just be friends or y'all have to be back together. No, like you forgive them for yourself. You don't have to, they don't have to have the same access to you. So yeah.
I love that. And that's coming from our young generation. So they're getting it. We're starting early. We're having these conversations early so that they can get it and they have healthier communication skills and relationships. I love that. Our next one, because the other party is unapologetic, don't let their lack of apology be the reason you're not able to forgive. We're living in bitterness and we're unwilling to change. Once we're set in our ways, it's harder for us to come out of it. We say that a lot of times about our older generation. Oh, they're set in their ways. They won't do this. Yeah, because they've gotten comfortable. They haven't had that teaching. So before we get set in our ways, let's be open to learning so that we can expand on our healing. I keep trying to remember. Sorry. As the young lady was saying, we equate forgiveness to forgetting. We're not forgetting. We're just deciding to move forward. But most importantly, it's important for us to look at the power of forgiveness and what we are able to do. When we do forgive, we're able to remove that burden. We have that weight. We did a wonderful meditation. And as we begin to relax, I can kind of feel like the burdens of some of the things that I was worried about being released. As we begin to forgive, you begin to release those burdens. Sometimes you have to go through this process, literally write it down and go through it for each situation. And understand you may get stuck at step number one. You may be there for a few days. You may go through the entire process with one scenario really quick, while it might take months to a year to forgive somebody in the next. It's just based off the depth of the trauma. Increased mental health. As we speak often, especially since the pandemic, about mental health, we're always talking about increasing our mental health. And by forgiving, we're releasing that anger. We're able to let go of those suicidal thoughts, that depression that starts to weigh in on us because we're angry. We're able to release some of that stuff. And then the ability to maintain healthy relationships. We watch Cinderella. We all have that idea of what this fairy tale life looks like. But until we're willing to forgive and let go of some of the things from our past, we'll never actually really get there, because we're going to carry each relationship with us. We're going to carry the hate for this man or this woman and the next. And we all get to that point to where now all men are horrible, all women are horrible, and I'm going to be single for the rest of my life because I don't want to deal with anybody else. Really, that's just a shield. You still want the love, you still want the hurt, but you're not willing to let go of that shield you put in front of you. This is why I say we want to make sure we forgive, because we have to let these guards down. And it removes stress and sickness. That's one of my favorite things to talk about, just because I experienced it myself. I told you guys from the get-go, I went to the doctor. I was paying money to literally go to a GI doctor because I couldn't figure out why I couldn't eat, why I lost 40 pounds in a year without exercise, and why I was just sick for every doctor to continue to tell me, I don't know what's wrong with you. I literally don't see anything wrong. We took out your gallbladder, but it didn't need to come out. And now you're just walking around. You're right, getting to the point, just looking for something to remove anything to make me feel better. And then as I really found out you're dealing with some things that begin to go to counseling and go through therapy, start journaling, start meditating, that's when I began to feel it. Now, don't get me wrong, it was hard. I cried many nights. I cried for hours on end as I would journal because as you begin to write, you begin to remember everything, not just from that situation, but then when I was 5, that situation was similar to that situation, and it's starting to all flood my memory. So at that time, I had to really just deal with it and heal with it because I was literally on my deathbed or headed towards my deathbed because I couldn't figure out how to let it go. I couldn't be Elsa. And then last but not least, peace of mind, right? That's our greatest thing is to have some form of peace of mind so we can just make it on a daily basis. Now, what we'll do is I'm actually going to keep going. I was going to take a small break. Does anyone need it? We okay to go? We could do a quick question and answers right quick. You good? Go ahead, Mr. Earl. You got a question?
Is this is in reference to the integral part of reconciliation and forgiveness. You know that go together. One can't be the fullness, just like the parables that's on the board, right there. So when we forgive, you get peace and all the other joys that we didn't define. So if a person don't want receive that, like you said earlier, you have to forgive yourself. So that's the start towards healing. Once you forgive yourself, that's a healing process, right? Then you reconcile with the harmer to express the forgiveness, and this is when the dialogue, like we doing right here, that's a process that would be clear, where a person can understand and appreciate. Forgiveness is for myself, not that you getting off the hook, whatever you done did to me, because we all know with the biblical teachings of Jesus when he had the stone and said, whoever is without sin, pick up this, cast the first stone. So even though bad things happen to good people, but we still have to go back to the point when you say a spiritual relationship. So if we take this spiritual application to bring that into, when you said earlier, turning the other cheek, we have to really be sharp on it's for yourself. And then we can move on in life without having, like you say, all the other emotional thinking that comes with, but once you let it go, you move to the next process.
I agree. Anybody else? No? Okay, let's talk reconciliation. So this is the next step. We're gonna say we made it through that journey of forgiveness. We had some rough days, we had some rough nights, but we made it. And so now we want to move forward. The first thing is to understand what reconciliation is. That's one of the definitions is the restoration of a friendly situation, which means we want to restore, which is no more, we want to restore and bring back balance, was no longer balanced, right? But what we have to remember is with reconciliation, the process of reconciliation depends on the attitude of the offender, the depth of the betrayal, and the pattern of the offense. So we may not be up for reconciling with someone who continues to exemplify the same behavior. Because what do they say? Apology without change is manipulation. So if you're not willing to change, then there's no need for us to continue to reconcile because I already understand how this process goes. Kid you not, I have someone in my life that I can tell you exactly how they work. They're gonna come say sorry to me this day, and then this day we're gonna get along, and then 2 weeks later they're gonna change that. And so as I speak this, I kid you not, preparing for this presentation, I feel like God just was like, oh, okay, well, we're gonna start going through this so you can really understand how this process works and what it looks like. But we have to be willing to understand that not everybody is gonna be worth reconciling with. As I stated earlier, the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation is like Mr. Earl said, forgiveness does not require participation or actions from the other person. They don't even have to be involved. They don't have to know. This may be a person you need to forgive from 30, 40 years from ago. They could be dead. They may not, they may be in prison. They may have kept going in life and decided to live a happy life. But that's not our business. Our business is to make sure that we're healthy and we're happy. As the offender, our role in reconciliation is to admit our wrongs. We want to release the guilt, show remorse, and then we want to accept the boundaries that the other person is going to set in place. Now, I will tell you from the get-go, when you're going through this process, this is not it's not easy. It's not even a slow process. I encourage you, depending on the depths of the situation, to get a therapist or a mediator involved because this may not be something that you can go through by yourself. Miss Amy may not see anything wrong that she did, and I may see everything wrong. So there's going to be that battle of I wasn't in the wrong and I'm in the wrong. There's no reconciliation that can take place because if we aren't even on the same page, how do we move forward? As the victim, we have to be open and willing to accept the apology. If you're not, communication says that we need to say something from the get-go so we're not all wasting our time. Agreed? Set expectations. We want to set expectations on what we're expecting to happen from this day forward. Are we going to continue to look back at this and deal with it every few months? Or once we finally get to that place of agreement, are we going to let it go and see what this future holds? Maybe we start off small and we can have coffee every once in a while just to talk because we're trying to be friends again. And then we'll work our way up to if we're family members, start coming around each other for the holidays. It's all a process. And then we want to determine our end goal and implement boundaries. Boundaries is a huge topic because you have to determine what the boundaries look like to you. I can't set boundaries for Mr. Earl, but Mr. Earl can set boundaries for himself. And when he tells me I need to respect them, even if I don't agree with them. Remember, no is a complete sentence. Y'all are laughing with me. Let's practice. Say no. No. It does not require a reason why I'm saying no. No, it's just no. And sometimes we don't have the word to explain how we're feeling at that moment, but we're trying to fight and find words, so we just come up with the best excuse. Be comfortable saying no, and if you're not comfortable, just get in the mirror every day and say no. It gets comfortable. It gets fun too. Take it slow. We're on a journey. This isn't a sprint. We're not trying to get there tomorrow. What we're trying to have is a long-term effect. We're trying to if we're going to get to a process of reconciliation, it's so that 3-4 years we can tell our story of how we reconciled and we came back together. It's not so that we can reconcile today and then tomorrow we're back at square one, right? Set reasonable consequences. We always say set boundaries, but what happens if we set boundaries and they don't respect our boundaries? If I ask you not to call me at 6 in the morning and I look up at 6:30 and you call me, then what did we determine is going to happen? I'm going to block you or what's next? Access denied. But when you say that, it's just not words. You have to implement those same words because I can't say don't call me today at 6 and I'm going to block you and then tomorrow you call me at 6:30 and I'm, hey, yeah. We have to implement that every day, whether we want to or whether we don't, because that's the only way they're going to take us serious. This thing here. Stick to your word. Most importantly, communicate. Always communication is key. Uncomfortable conversations are needed because that's how we overcome them. And a lot of times, especially in our community, we like to sweep everything under the rug. It'll be okay if we don't acknowledge it. Don't say nothing. What happens in my house stays in my house. But it's time for us to start the process of communicating, okay? And then adjust as needed. You may get on this process and realize this doesn't look like I thought it was going to look like. So instead of us going straight, we're going to make a left turn here, and we're going to try this out. And if that doesn't work, okay, well, now we're going to go to the right. You have to stay committed and be willing to make adjustments along the way if need be. You may get down to the point to where you realize after months of trying that this person, although they say it and they say they want to reconcile, that may not be the case. So how do we look at this and decide where to go from here, right? So some of the tips I like to say for reconciliation: seek therapy or mediation. That a way is someone, not a family member, not a friend, someone both parties do not know, that a way is biased and like no one feels like, oh, she's taking my side. This can be.
I just want to ask about seeking therapy.
Go ahead. Oh,
How do we do that in the community? I mean, how do I find a place and how do I know it's the right person? How do we find the right therapist?
love that question. Finding a therapist can take time. I started the very, very first time I went to therapy was in 2011 after I had my daughter. If you heard my story, I didn't deal with my issue until 2020. I was going to different therapists. So you have multiple. You have, if you are an employee, you have an EAP line that you can try. And they usually have about 4 or 5 sessions that you can visit to see how that feel is and if you want to continue. Resources, there are local nonprofits in your area, whether they specialize in exactly what you need or somewhere along the lines. We usually have resources and some type of connection to therapists that we can get you some assistance. But you want to look at your therapist as how they can relate to you. If you're a religious or a spiritual person, is that important to you? Because if they don't have the same belief in you and they're telling you to do something you have no agreement with, it's not going to work. The age range. Our older generation and our younger generation may not be able to go to the same therapist because the things you've experienced are going to be different from the things I've experienced. Not to mention, but we have a very different level where there was no internet at one point. Now we have internet, TikTok, and some of these people are using their therapy sessions just by looking at TikTok and going by whatever they're seeing. So we have to be willing to have a therapists who are more in their age. Gender is important, especially if we're dealing with sexual assault traumas. Why? Because if a man sexually assaulted me, I may not be comfortable going to see a therapist that's a man. He may not understand. Vice versa, a lot of our men don't speak up about sexual assault. They may want to go to a man. And let's be real, sometimes it's important for them to look like us because they have a better understanding. As I stated earlier, in the Black community, they're good for the sweep it under the rug, and what happens here stays here. I did a webinar, and we said it in the webinar, and the lady was like, what does that mean? And we had to explain, this is why it's important to have representation who looks like us, because if somebody understands what I've been through, they understand that whole scenario. They know how to bring me back from them and help me overcome it. Whereas even in the webinar, they was like, well, why would someone say that? It's just how we were raised. We did what was necessary to not get in trouble. So sometimes going as far, so race, gender, religion, how the energy feels when y'all are together. Do they listen? Are they, and this is, are they a medication therapist? Every time you go in, are they looking to put you on an antidepressant when you may not need it? So these are things you want to pay attention to because sometimes it's just about the money. If I can send this many people to go get this medication, that's putting more bank in my pocket. But how does that help someone else? So these are your resources. If you don't know where else to go, I live in Baton Rouge now. I lived in Dallas. I promise you, I like to talk enough that I can go find a connection for you. Give me a few days. I will email somebody. They'll be tired of me by the time you get there, but I promise you, you'll get the help you need. Work through it. Continue to work through the situation, whether it's forgiveness or reconciliation. Work through it until it's done so that you don't go back. However long that takes, continue to work through the process. And sometimes you really have to look at this and then. The court process within itself can determine how long reconciliation takes. Because if we're going in the court process and I'm trying to forgive you along this journey and I'm trying to do this, that's going to always be a setback because now, depending on what's happening in court, is going to determine my true move for you and what the outcome was. And then take it slowly. And I had a video. I'm not going to actually do the video because he said everything I pretty much said too. But I am going to open the floor for more comments, questions, or concerns. That way we can kind of get an idea and get everything cleared on the table. How are y'all feeling? Oh, I can't see. Okay. Hold on. Say your name and let me get out the way.
My name is Joshua, and I just wanted to talk about how I love the fact that you addressed about like in the Black community, we sweep a lot of detailed and vulnerable information under the rug, and that's not how we heal and move on and reunite. It makes a lot of people, especially like younger people, feel not only vulnerable, but make them feel like invalidated about what they experienced. And I'm actually glad you said that because sometimes it's hard for you know other people within our community to admit.
That is very true. Unfortunately, our younger generation feels very like they're not important, like they're not here. And that is because of what we've experienced throughout history. But we have to ask ourselves, well, we continue to talk about generational curses and we breaking this and we breaking that. Are we really? How are we creating that safe space? He still shouldn't be in a situation where he doesn't feel comfortable enough to speak or he doesn't feel validated. It has to end, and it starts with communication, and it starts with forgiveness. And parents, I'm sorry, but sometimes it starts with us apologizing to our kids because sometimes we are the problem. Yes, Miss Amy.
So I've been sitting on something since yesterday for folks who were in here. The lawyer who was behind you mentioned that he had, during the time of COVID, he had been working with a lot of domestic violence and trying to get people to reconcile. And I wonder if you can speak to that. I was struck by what you said, apology without change is manipulation. And my training as a trauma therapist, psychiatrist has always been that in domestic violence situations, unless, when it's often male on female, that you really, that the perpetrator needs to do some work beforehand. And I'm wondering how how you approach that with people, because I think it's a little dangerous if it's a, ongoing kind of chronic abusive relationship to try to, that people might rush to try to reconcile and forgive, and it perpetuates the cycle of abuse, right? So you go through the honeymoon, you know what I mean? You know what I mean, right? Yeah. Would you comment on that?
Yes, I will. That's a very good point. And I'm not gonna lie, when it comes to domestic violence, that's probably one of the hardest things to speak on because I stand strong on they have to be ready before we make any actions. We lose people, innocent people, to death in domestic violence because the person wasn't ready to leave. But what does happen when you've walked away and this person calls you with those sweet nothings and now they do feel like, hey, I'm gonna make that change, baby. You come over here, I got you a gift and we're going to move forward. Understand we may all fall into that temptation, but when you notice what's going on, when do you walk away or do you stay? It may be easy because there's still that love from there. One thing I say is I was in a domestic violence situation. I said the hardest thing as a victim is to understand that it feels like you can't live without this person, but really you can't live with this person. And you don't see it that way. What you see it is this person has been there, my situation directly. Oh, this person has been here with me while I'm depressed. They've coddled me through this. They really love me because I didn't have anybody else to talk to. So that's my go-to person. That's my safety, my comfort zone. But what I had to learn is that was also what was used against me to really bring me back in. When I was alone, oh, well, you don't have nobody to talk to. You might as well come see me. I ain't gonna hit you again. You know I love you. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, let me go over here. And then I find myself stuck because now I'm trapped in what you brought me in as instead of acknowledging that, hey, this could be a setup. And we have to take it slow. If you decide to go back, I cannot, as a person, tell you not to. I encourage you not to, but I can't tell you not to because you may not be at that place yet. But when you really get to that place of healing, you begin to honestly see how it can be a setup, and you refrain yourself either from going back. You get a safety, a support group that you can call that says, "Hey, this is what you look like," so you know who to turn to. Somebody you can trust that's not going to go spill your business, or you just learn from your healing that I'm not even willing to take that risk. We can reconcile maybe in therapy, but that doesn't mean we have to see each other outside of here. You can say you're sorry, but that doesn't mean I have to put myself in a position to see if you're really sorry. Because the last time you did it, I almost died. And they may be truly sorry, but it's not our job to really understand, seek to understand, but it's not our job to fully understand if you have really changed, because that could be the death of you. You're really smiling. I love it.
Okay. How do you deal with telling off your boss?
What if my boss is watching this? Well, if my boss is watching this, this is not what I would no. No, honestly, woo, that's a touchy subject. To be honest, I just want to say be quiet at work. We're there 8 hours. Do please, unless you have a backup plan or you won the mega millions and you know you don't have to go back, I encourage you never to tell off the boss, not because it's not just a good look, but you never know what's going to happen down that line and if you're going to need to come back to them. And I'm not going to lie to you, being an entrepreneur myself, when people are mean to me, I always say, at some point I'm going to come back across you and I'm going to let you know that you messed up. Like, you're going to want a job, and because I know your attitude and your character, it's not going to happen. But be willing to take a lunch or an extended lunch, an extra break, to go regather your thoughts. Do some of the meditation. That really helps a lot. Breathing exercise are heaven on earth. Once you have that down, it's like the best thing because you know how to go in there and kind of recalibrate and bring yourself back to a peaceful state. Don't go. Please don't go off. Any other questions? I feel like my boss is going to be watching. I'm going to be in trouble Monday.
I just find it so helpful, the distinction you're making between forgiveness and reconciliation. That helps me because I remember one time, and I could probably do it again today, I said to myself, I'm going to list all the people that I'm angry at. And that list was so long. It was name after name after name, and I'm going, what is wrong with me? And then I thought to myself, and some of them might be, sometimes you're mad at someone just for dying. You're angry at them for dying. And it's like, you can't, reconciliation is, the distinction is helping me so much because forgiveness is something you can always find, and it doesn't require reconciliation. You can always find forgiveness. And so that distinction you're making, is very, very helpful because it just frees me to just, the things that I get angry at. I might be just angry at a brother because he voted for Trump, and I just have to, for me, that pisses me off, and it's like, I don't want to talk to him or I don't want to go to Thanksgiving that day. You know what I'm saying? So forgiveness and the distinction is really helpful to me.
Thank you for that. Thankful. And that's when I would say seek to understand because we may not understand why he voted for Trump. We may not even agree with it, but he has those reasons. It usually has something to do with tax brackets and all that good stuff out there. So you just have to understand it. And if you don't want to reconcile that there, if you don't want to, I stand firm by don't put yourself in a situation you don't want to be in. If you don't want to go to Thanksgiving, it's okay to stay home. There are plenty of places that offer some type of cooked meal. Never put yourself in a position that you don't want to be in. I spent a lot of Thanksgivings and Christmases smiling and happy and going home, and my ex-husband would tell you I was hell on wheels. I wanted to fight him. He did absolutely nothing wrong, but I was like, why would you let me go here? And in return, guess what? He's angry. Because he's like, I didn't do nothing to you, and you're just going off on me, and you need to control this, but you're so emotional, and you haven't acknowledged what you're going through, that you're just taking it out on me. It's okay to miss Thanksgiving, not Christmas, but Thanksgiving.
I want to come back to telling off your boss. And I think that's where I say you have to first reach deep in yourself and find out if telling off your boss is really telling off the person that hurt you 20 years ago, or did your boss really do something wrong? And if your boss really did something wrong, that's where I would say reach out to the collective of your coworkers and hold and come together to hold the boss accountable, because I feel like that's a lot of what is coming up in this conversation, especially on the systemic level of, there are so many systems and bosses of systems in this country that need to be told off, that need to be removed from their positions of power. And I believe that the way to do that is in coming together and not just holding the boss accountable, but explaining to the boss what they're doing wrong, because the boss is caught in a pattern of abusing power, whatever the things are. The boss is doing some wrong shit, and the boss needs to be told what they're doing that is wrong. And then that is a process for that person to go through to reorder their habitual behavior.
One of the big things with having managers, I think that a lot of people struggle with is you don't know what type of it's the work. What type of work are you in? It's the industry. Are you comfortable enough to go to HR? Do you feel because there's people who shut down when they have issues with their bosses? Why? Because when I go to HR, then he brings in my manager, and where I thought I was in a safe place, now I feel uncomfortable. And then when I go on the floor, everybody knows my business, and I'm feeling like they're retaliating against me. So it gets really sticky, and that's why sometimes it's just hard to say. One thing I would tell you that I really enjoy about my job is they have, I don't know the exact term, and if you can implement this or suggest it, but it's where you tell two good things you're doing great and one thing we need improvement on. And that goes between me and my boss. I can give her two things and she gives me two things. Don't look for something just because you hate them, but give them some good feedback.
In the military, the worst thing you can do is go over your superior's head if you haven't gone first to him.
And the military, another story. That's another subject I'm not going to step on. I've been down that road too. Any other questions? Go ahead.
No, we do have to acknowledge that we are in very, very different positions sometimes. And there are people who have the context of their work context, maybe, that they really do have fewer freedoms than others of us. That said, I am the daughter of a maid. My mother worked from the time she was maybe 12 years old until she was about 80 because she wasn't doing anything. Then she was just talking. Uh, but 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 I know that the people in positions. My mother taught me a lot about how to. You may look as if you're powerless, but she had other ways of knowing that she was not powerless. And people have ways. It's a process, and but people, there are ways to say what you need to say, and then there also needs to be this place. Remember, Robert? No, you don't. You're way younger than me. All right, but Roberta Flack had a song, "Go Up Moses." All right, all right, all right. So the thing is that the way that song is "Go Up Moses," and she says at the end, "Black people, you need to let Pharaoh go, because Pharaoh can't be Pharaoh without you. Pharaoh doesn't want you, but Pharaoh needs you to sustain that imbalance in power." So sometimes we really do have to let Pharaoh go when it comes to talking to our bosses.
Did you get some encouragement to help you out? I wasn't the greatest help. I'm fresh in my career and kind of scared to say so. Look, I know my place in power. I'm gonna stay right where I am and keep the check coming. Any other questions, comments, concerns? How are y'all feeling after this? Let me ask you this. How has your thought process changed for forgiveness now that we have had the discussion? Clarity. Do y'all feel like this is something you can do at home? Is this something you feel like you're willing to? Better yet, let me ask this question. How many people feel like they're ready to actually take that road? Whether it may not be here because we don't want to express those emotions, but how many really feel like if they need to and they can go home and start dealing with this? And it's okay that you're not, because part of the conference is so that we have these conversations and begin to build up to get there, right? It's not going to happen overnight because in our process, we've been holding on to that anger for too long. And I'm not going to forgive you because what you're not going to do is cross me again. And we're going to make sure it doesn't happen. So because we have to overcome that, it's always going to be a process for us. Trust me, I know I still have my days. You want me to just repeat it for you? If you don't, I'll repeat it. I'll repeat it. Okay. Amen. She said, don't wait till you turn 100 years old to forgive and reconcile. That was, it's very, and it determines the outcome of your future in your life. How are you gonna experience, we all wanna live to the fullest, right? But part of that living to the fullest is being able to say, okay, yes, I forgive, and no matter what, I'm gonna keep pushing forward. Because sometimes that unforgiveness holds us steady. We get stagnant right here. We can't move forward. I used to have the worst excuses. Oh, I can't pass school because of what happened to me. Oh, I can't go to work. I can't keep a job because of what happened to me. I had so many excuses and I was able to blame it on somebody else. But the truth was I needed to release all that and just push forward and keep going. Because I was my own problem. Okay, go ahead. I got a point. Oh, thank you.
My question is, when being I'm Albert Dunnis. I'm part of the group, Chance and the Choice. I'm up here too. I was speaking earlier yesterday. And I'm going through a little situation like that. And the thing about forgiveness, right, it can't be mechanical. It have to be organic, right? It had to be free. That's the question. You made the statement that uh, when you forgive somebody and somebody apologize and they do the same thing, that's manipulation, right? I never looked at it that way. And then you made the statement about no is a whole sentence. I loved it.
Yes, but I want you to, yes, it has to be organic. Because if it's not organic, do we mean it? Are we going to change our process? I mean, I could come kick you right now and say, I apologize. I'm sorry. Wait, now, hold on, wait. But if I say I'm sorry and then I walk away and come back and kick you again, you're gonna be like, now hold on. The first time could have been an accident and you apologize, but now you done came back and kicked me again. We're gonna deal with this one way or the other. We are not gonna kick each other. But it's important to make sure we understand it cannot be mechanical because it's not real. It has to be organic. Just like I said with a domestic violence survivor, they don't leave until they're ready. Don't apologize until you're ready, until you're willing to make that move. It requires accountability. And if you can't be held accountable, there's no need for you to apologize. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people still in that stage, but we'll all get there. Any other questions? That is my time. I might as well stay here. I feel like a TV host. Thank you guys for joining me today. My name is Delashawn Bordeaux.
We gotta go big or go home. We're down to the gold. Never been a better time.